basically says that you should engage in two-way communication and building a symmetrical relationship, which means not only is the public's input sought before making a final decision, but they also use the input to create a plan to meet local concerns. So ethical leadership should be truthful and disclose accurate information to the public and treat them as partners. They should not only listen to the public for their own appearances, but they should listen to the public's concerns and not just serve self-interest and engage in dialogue that suits the public and the organization. So the goal is for the community as a whole to benefit, not just the leader. The leaders that best follow this model or have most integrated ethical leadership to me would be collaborative leaders because they share power and work together with the community to form a common good. Most leaders have quite a bit of power, and with that comes responsibilities. I think leadership directly influences the culture of an organization. If there's bad culture, then there's probably bad ethics. If you're unable to accept responsibility for your lack of leadership that has led to poor principles and practices, then you won't accept responsibility for things that should be addressed. For example, if you design a faulty product, you don't know when it's not, you don't know it's not necessarily unethical to put it on the market, but it is unethical to have the information and choose not to do anything about it, hoping nothing happens. Because while keeping the public in the dark may be good for leadership or the organization, it could potentially be bad for the consumer or community. The leader has to be the first one to accept responsibility because they have the most information and power. They shouldn't use their power to silence people, but instead use it to share information and work on solutions. Leaders who don't have ethics completely lack moral sensitivity because they don't know right from wrong, or maybe they do and simply don't care. So they can't even fathom the existence of an ethical problem like pollution. An ethical solution would not just be to move it to a weaker community with less voices and resources. Even people who do have ethics can face problems when other companies competing don't. So that's when like moral motivation kicks in and you have to do the right thing even though it's hard. And that just reverts back to serving good for the community and not promoting self-interest. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. It's a lot to unpack in what you said, which was great. You did. I'm going to focus something that stood out to me. A couple of things that stood out to me. So, like, I always try to kind of pull the things that maybe don't stand out to others, but it builds on what you said about the good of the common good, or the good of more than just the individual leader being important. And that's something that I actually practice in my current career, which is the concept of servant leadership and servants as leaders as servants. And so I think that using terms like community, like the book really focuses on like the list of rights and things that people can expect from their leaders. So as a servant leader, like one of the things that's really important is to consider that it kind of goes back to that community thing, right? Where as a servant leader, what's most important is what's going to be good for the group and what's going to provide them the outcome that is good for people, right? Because it's difficult for a follower to follow a leader that they don't see. So they don't see the actions backing up statements. And I think that servant leadership kind of holds one more accountable to that saying what you mean and meaning what you say, to holding yourself to the same standards that you hold others to. And so it's an important component, and that's why I love that list of rights. Especially things like the right to be accountable. It's like, it is, some people may not I can think of instances in poor cultures, for instance, like to build on what was said before, in a bad culture, these rights get stifled in weird ways, like rights to be accountable. If people are getting thrown under the bus, that doesn't give them the right to step up and own their mistakes, for example. So, I think that ethical leadership is so just directly tied to that to the concepts of doing what you say and of doing what's in the best interest, not just speaking it, but actually doing it. So it's like that follow through that's discussed, like the fifth step, that implementation step is the most important thing, because you could be the ethics are straight up lacking in any individual when they're lacking that follow through. And so I think that mentality of servant leadership allows for you to do that.
Good. Thank you, Amber. And for me, what I thought it was interesting for this week is that I think it's imperative to look and analyze the power of public opinion. Like in the beginning of the chapter, it says, for example, last week everybody was really confused, of a very important event that happened. And it reminded me, my husband taught a public opinion course last year. And the takeaway he wanted the students to learn was the I don't know option on surveys. And I think ethically speaking, as the textbook explains, is about a two-way communication where you're not pushing or feeding answers, but you're listening, you're responding. So I think that's why it's hard when a leader is not approachable, when they're not doing what they say, like what Amber was saying. It's because you don't have that mutual benefit. And I also like a lot the quote by Malcolm X on page 342 that says, "Wrong is wrong, no matter who does it or says it." So when it's more like a philosophical question, what is wrong? Ethically speaking, is it wrong to play favorites when somebody is indeed the best, or is it wrong to, in that way, jeopardizing others' opportunities? And I think that moral sensitivity is the most important component on ethical issues, because you have to know what's wrong. You have to know what you're dealing with. It's like an alcoholic person who doesn't know the problem, who doesn't know what they're dealing with. It's like dealing with an ethical issue cannot be solved unless it's recognized. And thus, perspective taking is a great way to tackle this issue. For example, at Starbucks, they took the perspective of the farmers by sourcing the beans ethically and getting a great focus on fair trade, as a company, which means that the cost of coffee will be higher, but they're doing this ethically. They're trying to see the other side. They're trying to lead by looking at who they're dealing with, and the issue to, taking that perspective. It's hard but then it provides good quality, products for people, and it's just looking deeper, looking for what's the issue, and that way you can deal with it. So I think the greatest leadership quality, that it's just being aware of what's the issue.
So you said a quote that I was going to say, the wrong is wrong, that wrong is wrong no matter like who says it or who does it. I was going to say that because it's true that, people usually have set morals, as a whole, as a society. It definitely depends on your culture, but you mostly know what is right and what's wrong. Like, it's just known. But if you take a culture, in a third world country, and you take the culture here, what's right to them might be wrong to us. So I feel like when a leader is being, they're trying to be ethical, it definitely depends on like their audience. Like, I guess, like the election. So our new president, a lot of people would say he's not an ethical leader. And maybe he's not, but he sounds ethical to a certain group of people. He, what he thinks is right to do is right by a lot of Republicans, but not by, the Democrats. He's wrong to, the Mexicans that are going to be deported because of his, what he wants to do. It just depends on the audience. And so I think ethics is really interesting that way. That it just depends on who you're speaking to. And that can be really tough, because you're like, well, I think I'm right. I think that this is ethically right, and so do a lot of my followers, and you can't, and so it's really difficult for, I think, some leaders to really be ethical for all people. I think that it just really depends on who they're speaking to. So, yeah, that's what I have to say.
I completely agree with you, though. Like, you can't feed to everybody. That's why everybody, they have that's why people have different opinions, just to the same morals or opinions, and that's great, I would say. is that we can live in a place and coexist and be able to disagree with each other but still live together. So I think the thing in the book that really is the components of ethics, and that's recognition. So you identify the existence of problems. You know, this is an issue. We need to do something about it. Judgment, knowing right versus wrong. 3, moral motivation. So following through with the choices. You say you're going to do this, so you to do this. We really would respect if you did follow through with it. Moral characters. That's the actual follow through. I do think that leadership reflects on deep-rooted habits and skills and traits and ethical way. It's hard for a lot of people because, like Laura said, maybe one of you said, unethical issues have to be recognized, and some people don't see the issue. So, like, a leadership in the company could be this overriding issue that everybody else sees, and then since it's a business and has to be run, they might not be able to recognize it, or they don't want to recognize the things right now is fine. I think that other conflicts of interest or gift giving, whistleblowing, there's a ton that goes into ethics, and definitely reflected in public leadership. They alter culture, definitely. My definition of ethics would definitely be the principles that govern a person or a group's behavior.
Okay, so basically what we're saying is ethics are the principles that guide behavior to the best interest of parties involved.
Yep. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry it's so long.